Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tea with TPS. Our distinguished guests today are from Singapore, but one is from India and the other is from China. Our discussion is not going to be politics at all, but this is a very interesting moment in the history of India and China that we are talking. And that too about Sichuan, and that too about the Hans and the Tibetans. These all have a major political implications for India. And we do not know where we stand with China at the moment. And very tense on the border, but we will not go into all that. But inevitably, our discussion will come around the conflicts between the Hans and the Tibetans, which really caused this whole problem between India and China. But what we have before us is our two brilliant young people, both of them writers, both of them adventure travelers, both of them photographers, I don't know what more. Very talented, very adventure loving, very excited about exotic places, and so many other things which we see in this beautiful book called The Other Shangri-La. I must say that we are together here because we share a common publisher. Mr. K.P.R. Nair published my first book about 12 years ago. And he has published at least 3-4 of my other books. And he is your publisher too, and that he is the one who has brought us together, so I must thank him for that. And this book is extraordinary. I read it in one sitting because it is so absorbing, so much excitement, so much fun, the sense of humor that you have. Which is very, very nuanced and very, very, what shall we say, not public. It's a kind of, humor that comes, and when you laugh without realizing it was a joke or it was humor. So it's very fascinating in many ways. And this place that you visited, of course, it's called Shangri-La. Shangri-La stands for all that is beautiful, all that is nice. You think of the Shangri-La Hotel in Hong Kong. You think of even Singapore is sometimes referred to as Shangri-La. But you have the other Shangri-La, and that is what you emphasize. This is not in southern China, but this is in Sichuan. And this is a place where you have the highest town in the world, the largest monastery in the world, the most dangerous roads in the world. So my first question is, why do you do this? For me, a holiday means a 5-star hotel, preferably with a first-class ticket. Go and stay in a lovely hotel, look around, enjoy yourself, and come back. That is my idea of a holiday. Here you are, two of you going to this unknown land. You don't even know what will happen to you the next moment. And you came very close to that kind of dangers all through. So what impels you? What encourages you to do this kind of adventure travel?
Thank you, TPS, for having us on this show. It's an honor for both of us. And thanks to Konark and to Mr. Nair as well for giving these words a physical life and bringing us together for this. Now, when it comes to traveling, I was actually a very homebound person. For many years in my life, I never used to like travel. I never liked travelers. When relatives used to visit my home, I was always very angry, like, why have they come here? Why can't they stay at their house and all the comforts and all that? But it was during my education when I had to finally leave my sweet home, and then I met a wider world, and then I went to the United States and lived there for 2 years. And that's when I was sometimes alone and with nothing to do. I began just taking public buses in the United States, which are often very dirty and attract a certain segment of people. And the interesting thing was, even though they were not very well off, they really opened out their hearts to me, and they would share their food, they would share their entire life story, and all these encounters with people, the common people, is what really got me hooked into travel. And since then, myself and I've been fortunate to have a partner who is equally passionate about traveling in a similar style. We have been around a few countries and taking on these routes which have been less traveled, where we don't see a lot of these comforts which we get in our day-to-day lives. Now, you asked why we do that. For me, Number one, I have seen is that when we are taking the more comfortable way of journey, we often encounter only the travel guides, the hotel people, the fancy restaurant waiters, and they are very nationalistic and very patriotic, and they paint a very rosy picture of everything that is there in their country, and I could easily pick that up in any brochure. But for me, the real thrill of traveling is being out there with the common people, with nomads, with homeless people, because even like small gestures of kindness from these strangers which we often encounter, that really makes us feel good about humanity as a whole and kind of rejuvenates our soul, if I may say that. So, I mean, for me, that is the reason why I like to travel the way we do.
How about you, Yolanda? Only after you met him and married him, or you also were an adventurous person before?
I think I always had that desire that I wanted to go to this part of China actually like 10 years before we actually made the trip. But I never made it because I haven't met the right partner to go together with. And so that was kind of a sense of fulfilling my dream. And on the other hand, I think I really enjoyed the kind of more basic traveling to a bit of unusual places because there are a lot of surprises that such places offer. For example, when we actually did not know we would be arriving in the what was that name? Sorry, the beauty contest, right? We didn't know that it's going to happen that day. And when we went in the village, we were like, what is happening? And we saw a lot of people, we saw police, we saw people dressed nicely, and we had no idea. So this sort of surprises that, is something that's very unique in such kind of travels.
And you also are a writer. What do you write?
So I was pretty lazy in the sense that I wrote poetry in my earlier years because it's short and easier to manage. After meeting him, and I noticed that he does so much of research for everywhere he goes to, and that's so much work. So I decided definitely not to write nonfiction. But I was somewhat still inspired to write a little bit more, so I went into fiction as well and published my collection of short stories after that.
You can write haiku. They are even much shorter.
Yeah, thanks for that suggestion.
You can write short poetry. Well, talking of travelogues, all your 3 books are on travel, right? And that's a very, very promising genre of writing in the sense that everyone is fascinated by travelogues. Next to biographies, I love to read biographies, autobiographies. But next to that is travelogue because it is also a bit of autobiographical. But your book is a lot different because when people write travelogues, they try to go deeper and wider into the subject. It's like saying that I reached Singapore and then take the Wikipedia and copy all about Singapore. Some similar exercise like that. That is how travelogues come up very often. But what I found here was you were looking for something very special at every place. You don't give us a history of the place or a scripted story where it happened, what is the history, where is this temple, like that. But it comes very naturally. And so it is more easy flowing and easier to understand, even though you don't get the benefit of knowing everything about that place. So is that a very conscious effort?
I do try something to that extent. I believe that if I can, through my writing, create sufficient interest about a certain area, then it is perhaps not as difficult for a common reader to find out a lot more about the history, the geography, the politics, and all economic aspects about that place, because so much of information is available out there. So I tend to focus also on individual stories. So a lot of my travel writing and encounters are focused on individuals and trying to find out the nuances of these unique characters I met along the way. Because I believe that, many travelogues, like you rightly said, they try to paint too big a picture that all Indians are like that or all Chinese are like that. I think that's a very dangerous statement to make because for my case instance, this trip through the Sino-Tibetan frontier. We may have met more than 50 people, but I can in no way say that they represent all Tibetans and all Chinese people. So it will be very dangerous for me to talk about a whole culture or civilization in my travelogue with such generic terms. And that's why my stories, I tend to focus more on these individual nuances, which I find fascinating myself, and I try to make my readers get interested in those lives as well.
Yes, I get the impression that this is a series of cartoons or a series of experiences linked together. And also you don't express an opinion on anybody. I don't know whether you are more fond of Tibetans or of Hans. You cannot make out because you are very objective and you speak of both of them with the same kind of objectivity, same kind of nuanced approach to them. So that's why I found this book very fascinating. And so that's why it stands out from the other travelogues. And you're talking of the Shangri-La, of course. Can you tell us the Hollywood Shangri-La and this, what exactly are the differences?
Right. So I believe there are many Shangri-Las. Of course, if you count all the hotel chains, and there are many copies as well, which are not genuine, but they try to go by the name Shangri-La. Even they could be just charging $10 for one night. So there are probably tens of thousands of Shangri-Las out there. Or maybe there is none even, because it's an imaginary creation, which...
It's an utopia.
Yeah. It was coined by this James Hilton, who has actually never visited these places, and he just formed a fictional city or fictional place called Shangri-La, where people live long and are happy and are not sick. And this was based on actually Joseph Rock's travels. And of course, today many towns and cities in China, Tibet, all these parts, they are trying to get this name Shangri-La for themselves.
But the city in China has already adopted it, right? In South China, there is a place called Shangri-La now.
Yes. Right. It's a place, I think there's 5 years or 10 years old, which is called Shangri-La. And I'm sure the life expectancy is no different from any other city that is there. Right. So that's all.
Sichuan itself will not call themselves Shangri-La, no? They would not recognize themselves.
So one of the places that we visited, Riva, which is near the Yading Reserve, one of the most beautiful places that I have seen in my journeys, that does attempt to call itself Shangri-La. Of course, I think its marketing budget is slightly less than the other city which has called itself Shangri-La. But there are a few cities who have called themselves officially Shangri-La.
I think the ironic part is that actually, although Yading Reserve is so super beautiful, the Rewa village is actually nothing other than just a tourist stop. So it's full of just concrete buildings, and there's nothing to, it's nothing like Shangri-La.
But one thing that struck me was that though, they are away from city life and everything, they are not rustic, as I expected. They are not people who don't know anything about the rest of the world. Right. You see the invasion of cultures into their lives all the time. They have a beauty contest. There won't be in a tribe. I don't know whether you'll have a beauty contest. And so the Western or the so-called modern civilization is very much in this part. But at the same time, there is no economic development to match with it. Is that the situation?
Yeah, of course, a lot of things have changed in the last 50 years, and particularly in the last 30 years after the reopening of Chinese market to investments and other kinds of travel. And what we see today is that most of these communities, especially after the arrival of mobile phones, are very well connected culturally, to some extent also economically with, if not the Western world, then at least the rest of China. It's very well integrated in economic and cultural terms. And of course, there is some concern about that as well. The Tibetans who form the majority of many of these places, they feel that their culture is getting more sinified in terms of the language, in terms of customs like New Year celebrations and all that. So there is a bit of concern about sinification of culture as well. But the material development is very real. If you compare life there, from what we have heard from the locals to what it is today, there has been significant material development. along with diseases like diabetes and all, which have come in. Which
The modern life has come.
Yes.
But is this part of a deliberate attempt by the Chinese to completely conquer Tibet? I mean, when you have that, you tend to invest more in a backward area to bring them up and make them like your own lifestyle. So that must have happened. Lots of Han Chinese have moved into Tibet after the Dalai Lama left. And therefore, they must be making huge investments and make sure that they have the cell phones and they have the other facilities as part of their being civilized as part of China. That must be a policy on the part of the government.
Yes, that is very much policy, as was the case in many parts of India as well, which were restless for different points of time. And but one of the interesting thing about this area is that while it is Tibet, it is not exactly Tibet because it doesn't form part of the Tibetan province. So when you think of this in geopolitical terms, a lot more investment has probably gone into the Tibetan provinces compared to this particular part of the world. And many of the restrictions which were there in terms of traveling, for instance, in Tibet province, you have to travel as part of a tour group. These restrictions didn't apply to us in this part of the world. And that is one of the reasons why we decided to go here rather than to Tibet proper. And many of our friends we met along the way, they said that there's nothing to see in Lhasa. It's a Han Chinese town. Yes. So that's the kind of change which we heard has happened in the Tibetan province as we know it. But this is the part which is at the border with the Tibetan province and Sichuan, where the
So you mean to say this was part of mainland China even before?
That's
was the Dalai Lama in charge of this place?
Yeah, that's a sensitive question, and it forms part of the whole Tibetan Qinghai Plateau, and the culture and the religious aspects are very much homogeneous to some extent with the rest of Tibet. Yeah, so at different points of time, it was ruled by, or it was under the Dalai Lama or the Desi or the regent of him, or the Mongol invaders or kings who were in charge of that area. And at different times, even there were Qing dynasties and Ming dynasties to whom these obeisance to. So, history is a very sensitive topic in this part of the world. And it always is a matter of how far you go and how deep you go into history and whose words you listen to. So these are very sensitive words in this part of the world.
And the other thing I noticed was about Dalai Lama and generally about lamas. I didn't find the people were so reverential, at least in their conversations with you. They were referring to him in various ways, not the way, say, I would refer to the Dalai Lama. I have had the pleasure of meeting him and I really revere him for his, he's a great man in many ways. But I don't see that among the people here, among the Tibetans, feelings nostalgic about the Dalai Lama. Of course, they keep saying to you, you're an Indian, you look after the Dalai Lama, so I like you, kind of thing. We have had comments like that, which I heard a lot in the United States and Austria. In Austria, people would say, we love Indians because you keep the Dalai Lama in your country. Similarly, American politicians. In fact, our good relations with America came after the Dalai Lama, sort of promoted it in a sense. And so that kind of reverence I didn't see, whether you didn't catch it or whether because of your own inclinations you didn't want to give him much prominence. But I would have expected much more about the Dalai Lama in these narratives.
Well, actually, historically, this part of Sichuan, or this part, the Tibetans are closer to a different sect of Tibetan Buddhism. So they are more followers of the Karmapa Lama rather than the Dalai Lama. But having said that, the attitude many of these people express towards Dalai Lama is also conditioned by the political situation there, where appreciation of Dalai Lama can lead to problems for the person. Yeah? And so for a long time, you wouldn't have a picture of Dalai Lama in the monasteries or in the houses. But today you can see pictures of Dalai Lama in the monasteries here, hidden somewhere or behind a cloth. And to that extent, I would say the reverence is actually very strong because they're taking great risks in that sense, even for that small display or that small mention of reverence that they have for them. So it's hard to say whether they are more respectful of Dalai Lama here or less. But I must say that given the context that they are more followers of the Karmapa, their attitude towards Dalai Lama is more of a symbol of Tibetan culture as a whole. And that's why whenever we met people who heard that I am from India, they got their children to come and touch me just because that I am from India.
You're the host of the Dalai Lama, yes. Right. But they don't think in terms of a return of the Dalai Lama or return of Tibet. You didn't find anybody like that.
Yeah, that would have been perhaps too dangerous for them to express, even if they had such kind of intentions or feelings inside them.
But there's a lot of pride among the Tibetans, which we have heard about elsewhere, which also comes out in your book. Somebody telling you, I'm a Tibetan, you can trust me, I will never let you down. And is that a reality? Because otherwise I also find you're talking about them charging the tourists too much, like in India, cheating people, etc. So how do you match this dual kind of character?
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that all the few travel literature I have read about, many of them are also coming from China, were talking about being on the guard with Tibetans because it's risky to negotiate, it's hard to trust them. But that's one of the things about travel, that you can read something, but unless you experience the people and their interactions with you upfront, these biases tend to remain. And that's why I encourage travel for everyone, to remove these mental biases that we have. And it happened to me as well, that while I was always on the guard in the first few days, these interactions with the local Tibetans made me trust them a lot more going forward. Now, you talked about the pride of Tibetans in their culture, and that is very real. It's not just religion, but also their music, their food, their way of dressing, and general macho character of the men. They are very proud of that. And also, to some extent, in China, all Tibetan things have become kind of cool. You have these big brands which use Tibetan script as their brand logo. So there is both ways. You have Tibetans taking pride in their culture. Some singers have been very well known now. Tibetan singers have become big hits in China. And at the same time, China also, the Chinese people, the Hans as well, they are kind of glorifying or exoticizing, whichever word you use, the Tibetan culture. So there's a kind of coolness attached to the whole everything Tibetan now. Maybe Yolanda, you can talk about
Yolanda,
that.
you are half Han and half something else, right? You're not a full Munch or...
So I have maybe 1/4 of the Manchurian blood. Not necessarily Manchurian, because that's actually a Japanese term.
Oh, Munch is Manchurian, is it? Okay. I didn't realize that. But there is a fascinating situation where you are dressed up as a Tibetan princess or something, and you went around saying, I'm fake. So how did you feel at that time? But you have a Chinese blood and so on. So how did you feel? Did you really feel fake, or you felt that this was just a fun thing?
I think it was just really fun, right? I saw the whole streets of girls. Everyone was wearing that headgear, and I was becoming so curious how it is like. So, and I didn't realize that people started to take my photo. But I think I was finding it very fun, because I then could sit down with all the other girls when they were taking selfies, and then now they would include me.
But you didn't merge with the people there, unlike Shivaji. They wouldn't mistake you for a local person. That's not possible, right?
I'm not sure was on the mind of the tourists who took my photos.
Particularly because you are with him, maybe therefore they didn't connect you as a local person. But,
yeah, but I might be able to pass as a local person, because I think the girls, they look a bit somewhere in between Tibetans and Han Chinese. And I think I could be a good fake.
when they say that these girls in that particular town are very beautiful, you have not described Shivaji, how beautiful they are and why they are beautiful, eyes or lips or whatever. Why are they called so beautiful? And that's been generally told about all of them.
Yeah, I didn't want to describe them in too much detail because then my wife would have thought I'm observing them too closely. But in general, the reputation for the girls of the Ganga region is for their beauty, one, and number two, for their courage and strength of character. Yeah, because they used to have a queendom there, and it was hereditarily passed from one queen to another, according to some sources in history. But also, they were known to have beautiful skin and beautiful eyes, which is one of the big fascination for many people in that part of the world.
But do they have chinky eyes? No.
Sorry?
Do they have chinky eyes, narrow eyes?
It's somewhere in between, I think, the Indians and the Chinese eyes. Yeah, it's somewhere in between because I think it's certainly deeper than the Chinese eyes, but it's not as rounded as Indian eyes. So it's somewhere in between.
So I find them extremely beautiful, not because of the look and more of a kind of an attitude. Girls are so free to express themselves. I felt the kind of confidence which you, nowadays in the Western society, we see women being very confident, but these girls in a sort of a remote place, they are still in that kind of high spirit. And then also even in that love triangle that we saw, that lady, she was just so, I don't know, I think she was just full of life. And that kind of beauty is not just about, how fair the skin
Not
is.
necessarily physical. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I understand that. And other comforts. Why are those roads so rough and tough and so on? Is there no progress, no development taking place? Tourism and so on?
Yeah, the Sichuan-Tibet highway, which is what passes through that part of the world, it has to pass through very difficult terrain. Yeah? So there are these, on an average, the height altitude of these places are between 4,000 to 5,000 meters. Some of the passes could be almost 5,000 meters. So there's snowfall, there's a lot of winding nature of the roads, and heavy vehicles go through there. So even if they are built, they have to be rebuilt almost every season just because of the terrain as well as the weather conditions over there. But having said that, there was a lot of construction projects going on that part of the world, widening the roads and also making them, just repairing them. But still, the story is that among the drivers, they say that drivers don't become men until they have driven the Sichuan-Tibet highway.
They become adults and say drive on that road. So, yeah. No, but I was imagining both of you kind of clinging onto that van, which could fall off any moment. And did you regret at any moment, why the hell did I come here? Did you feel that way?
I actually did because the drivers were so interested in two of us, and one driver kept showing his son, his lover, and all that on the phone to him, and then he, out of politeness, was responding to that, and I'm like, stop it, guys!
You have to drive also.
Exactly.
Heart comes to your mouth, kind of a situation. And how about food? That's an interesting subject in the whole book. Every night it's a challenge what you eat and what you don't eat, and you're a vegetarian. What is your vegetarian story? How come you're a... Assam is not a particularly vegetarian place.
No, it isn't. And I come from a Bengali family, and everyone from my family are still big eaters of fish. So as of now, only me, and recently my wife has also become a vegetarian. And it's purely because of compassionate reasons. Yeah. So I've been a vegetarian for almost 9 years now. As soon as I got married, I became a vegetarian.
Bad luck for her.
And she became one.
I have two sons, both of them married vegetarians, and they're really restless. But of course, now they have adjusted themselves to that. And one is, not even milk, no milk products, all kinds of things.
Okay.
And I used to cook when I went to New York, but now I don't know what to cook because they are vegetarians now, so it's more difficult to find something interesting. But how about India? Is there anything particularly significant about being an Indian in this part of the world?
Yeah, I mean, of course, among the Tibetan.
Are you taken as foreigners? I mean, they thought that you are contestants in the beauty contest. Now that I have seen you, I can imagine that you could have been a contestant for a beauty contest. But other than that, India as it is, I don't get much from your book about that, except the Dalai Lama bit. Otherwise, do they feel culturally, we say centuries of civilization links, etc.? Do you see any evidence of it?
No, that's very distant in their minds. And what has happened is in Tibet, of course, the Buddhism came through China. So China got the Buddhism from India, and then they passed it on to Tibet. Of course, it's again a controversial subject how they got Buddhism. But then, of course,
Which
over
Buddhism? Now Nepal says that Buddha was born in Nepal.
But of course, Tibetan kings and leaders, they used to get a lot of Indians to come in and translate scriptures from Sanskrit and Pali to Tibetan language in the past. I think those kind of cultural interactions have stopped in almost like 300-400 years back. And Tibetans, they added a lot more flavor to the Buddhist ideologies and theories, and it's very distinct from the kind we follow in India today. Of course, Tantric Buddhism, which is there in Tibet, is kind of...
No Bollywood movies?
No, not really. Bollywood was not as popular there. Though among the Hans, Bollywood music is popular, especially among the middle-aged and older women for their evening dances. Some Bollywood tunes are quite popular among the Han people over there.
Because I was in Soviet Union where, Bollywood music was, anyway, any village you go, Juta hai Japani, you can hear. No?
Yes.
So you don't see any of that kind?
No, not of that sort that you see in the ex-USSR countries or Indonesia, even for that matter. That kind of the recent cultural connections have been relatively weak between these people.
And no historic connections also. They are not aware of India-China problems or anything like that. Nothing.
They are aware of that because on Chinese media and all that, it's very much 24/7.
I see. But that didn't affect you. They didn't think of you as enemies, or...
Not really. I mean, all of these come to people interaction. So we had a lot of interaction with the policemen. We had interactions with government officials. Some places we did have to register ourselves where we were concerned that, especially in a place like Serta, which is right in the middle of nowhere, and the police were wondering why has someone from India come here, of all places. But they took it more as a curious event. I don't know what happened in the back end, but I didn't face any challenge. And I mean, I've traveled to China many times. Every year I go there 3-4 times, and people are always warm to me. I've never had any hostility or any other feeling from them other than warmth and welcome from any Chinese person.
Okay, very good. Now I'll withdraw for 5 minutes, and I would like you to argue out the merits of the two foods, Indian and Chinese food, between the two of you, because I see them in the book. It's very fascinating for your viewers what your views are. I mean, you can exaggerate it a little bit, but you tell her about the greatness of the food of India, and you tell him about the greatness of the food of China. I won't say anything. Okay.
So you want us to talk about the greatness or the weakness?
Either way. It's a debate, so you can take it up whichever way. Here I find that both of you, I mean, you prefer Indian food, or she says this is all just stir fry, and you say that, and she must be thinking that too much of masala, too much of gravy, and that kind of thing. That is the kind of thing I would like to hear.
Yeah, I mean, after almost 3 weeks of eating very similar food, and given that I was a vegetarian, it was hard to have much diversity. And this is a part of China where Sichuan food rules. And whole of China now, Sichuan food rules. And everything tasted the same to me. So it felt like, the people, when they saw the vegetables there, they thought the only way to treat it would be to put some salt and boil it a little bit and put tons of Sichuan chili powder. That was my idea of food over there.
can't be helped if you are in the food heaven of China and then you blame it saying being too uniform, right?
So I would say that Indian food has so much more diversity and so much more things they have done with vegetarian stuff and desserts that China has no comparison to that.
This is such a strange logic. You are comparing the entire Indian food with one province of China. That too, you are only tasting the vegetarian part of it, which theoretically does not exist because the whole Sichuan food is about meat, rabbit, and everything else, right? So about Indian food, I think the first thing is about its looks. That's really terrible. The first time I saw this palak paneer, the dal palak or whatever it is, it looks like something coming out of a chicken's body. That was seriously my sense that time. Like that too was like a chicken with maybe Rani stomach. And then after we got married, and I started to practice using my hand to eat, and I was still wearing that bridal beautiful crystal nails, and then after eating one meal I already had it fully dyed yellow because of the turmeric powder, and you guys put turmeric in everything, right? So I think that whole list can go on and on because I think the looks of it is just something very hard to put up with, and that's why the majority of Chinese cannot take the looks of Indian food, not even entering the phase of trying or enjoying the taste.
But look at how the Chinese package their food. You know, most of the Chinese grilled food, they are just wrapped in plastic bags which you use to dump trash in our dustbin. So that's how I've had those grilled food, and they're just wrapped in polythene sheets, and half of the sheet has melted within the food.
Yeah, I'll agree that Indian wrappers are much better because there is an intellectual aspect as well. Because in the street, every food you have, you actually get a newspaper, which makes you become much more literate. And then sometimes I think I was lucky to have one, what is that, the samosa wrapped in someone's mathematics homework. And I think after that, my math score will increase.
That is sustainable development. We use it again and again. But living in Singapore, both these are very, very popular. The best Indian food I've eaten in Singapore, the best Chinese food I've eaten in Singapore. So there should not be a clash between the two of you on this.
Yeah, actually,
what is the compromise now at home? What do you eat?
Okay, so actually, I'm a big fan of Chinese food, all things considered, and I would think that she prefers Indian food to Chinese food at least. But this was just for the sake of.
That's right. This is just a dialectical discussion.
At home, because of I think just the sheer convenience of cooking Indian food, and also because my parents also visit from time to time. I think we have migrated more towards Indian and Middle Eastern food compared to Chinese food in the last.
Can you use chopsticks at home? Do you use chopsticks now or no?
I think there is a big challenge if you try to use chopstick to eat dal or Indian food in general.
Well, the test is if you can pick up a boiled egg with chopsticks. That is the final test. I lived in Japan, so we mastered it. Now my wife refuses to eat with anything else except chopsticks. I mean, when it comes to noodles or Chinese food, we ask for it. While we all ask for a fork and a knife, etc. So because we started off in Japan. Well, coming back to the you go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, coming back to the book, this one of the reviewers of your book said that the scene about the dead bodies being thrown to the vultures is a little too, what shall we say, shocking. And he says, instead, I wish he had described some marriage or something. But what prompted you to describe it in so many details? But we also have the same kind of thing among the Parsis, right? In Mumbai. There is a place where the dead bodies are thrown to the vultures. But here I heard that they even cut the body into pieces. And also this theory that only the vultures will eat only the good people and the bad people they will not eat. So it's a big disgrace if they are not. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so sky burials are one of the highlights of or unique aspects of Tibetan culture. And the reason they chop up the bodies before they feed it to the vultures is to make it easy for the vulture to consume the meat. And it actually makes perfect scientific sense as well, because it's at an altitude where the soil layer is very thin, so you don't have big trees, you don't have firewood to burn the bodies, you don't have enough soil where you can bury the dead, and of course you can't just put it in the stream because it will poison the water. So it makes perfect sense. And also there is a religious and spiritual aspect to it, because the vultures can fly really high. They believe that the dead body, once part of the vulture, can actually be taken to heaven with that. Now, also the Tibetan attitude towards death is that once they believe that once the soul has departed from the body, there is nothing of any significance left in the body itself. So there is no attachment to the body as such. Yeah, so that's the whole logic. And as with many cultural aspects, it may seem shocking to some people, but it makes perfect sense to the people who are practicing it. I mean, the same thing applies for many aspects of our Indian culture as well.
But is it all of Tibet like that, or is it only in Sichuan?
Yeah, no, it's most of the Tibetan places, they follow this practice.
And it's not in conflict with the Buddhist rituals?
No, it is fully in alignment with the Tibetan Buddhism.
Because we lived in Bhutan for some time. We never heard about this there, because they're also basically Tibetans, but never heard of it. Yeah. And on the contrary to what you said, they respect the dead bodies a lot. The king passed away and he kept him for 100 days, as though he was alive. They were serving him food and even cigarettes.
Yes,
so 100 days they kept him with great reverence and all that, and then he was buried sitting. All that I remember many years ago. So that Bhutanese have not adopted the what's called air burial, is it? Is it called
sky burials? Sky burials.
Mm-hmm. Well, what else can you tell us about your book? Be a salesman now. Because the most difficult thing, the most easy thing is to write a book. Yes. Selling it, publicizing it, asking your friend to buy it. Nobody buys a book from you. You offer a copy, they keep it happily, and please sign it for me, and the end of it. And the publisher gives you only 12 copies. All these problems. And writers' problems don't end when they finish the writing. So finding a publisher, getting it printed properly, distributing, marketing. And now there is this big competition with Kindle and others. So what has been your experience with these 3 books?
Yeah, I mean, I've been fortunate that all these 3 books that I have published so far, they have gone into their 2nd edition. Of course, this is the latest one, which was just released, the other Shangri-La. And
this was published only in India, or you published it somewhere else?
So right now,
Konark version is the only one?
No, Konark is the only one. So it's available in India, and they just have supplied it to Singapore as well. And it's available worldwide through Amazon, through Konark. Yeah. So it's as a digital book, it's available worldwide. We are hoping by October it should be available in the United States and United Kingdom as well, once the shipping becomes easier because of COVID.
Yeah, there's a wrong time also for publication. Yeah. Book release. You had a book release, online kind of thing. It's very difficult, the whole situation is. So some people are just waiting for the COVID to be over so they can release it properly.
Yeah, many book launches have been delayed, especially by the big houses. And some of the reasons why I would encourage people to pick up this book is because number one, it talks about a region that is at a very sensitive moment in history, and very few people have talked about it. And given the recent restrictions, some of the places that we visited, like Larun, which is the world's highest monastery and the largest illegal slum at such an altitude, as of now, no tourists or foreigners are allowed to visit there. So we were fortunate to visit many of these places which are now barred to foreigners. So my book will give an account of these very interesting people and fascinating landscape as well as cultures which are present there. And at the same time, I believe, like all travel literature, it provides an understanding of people like you and me and how they are living their lives in very different parts of the world. And given where we are now, where travel is becoming hard, and we don't know when we will be able to go to another place again, I believe books like these are the only way to sort of fly away from your doors and windows.
To savor another culture.
Yeah.
6 months I have not been on a flight. It has not happened to me in the whole world, whole life. I'm in this house last 6 months. Unbelievable. But let's hope things will get better. You will be able to travel more. And what is your next destination when you get released from this prison?
So right now, yeah, for us, even being able to go to the supermarket is kind of a travel plan. It takes some kind of travel planning over here. We had to cancel a fair amount of planned travels. We were planning to go to Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, those Stan countries, but we had to cancel them. But we are hoping that at least in this part of the world, in this region, there will be some limited amount of travel, which has already begun, and it will be made available to more people pretty soon. So we should be able to take care of that. But having said that, I can't
in my case, what has suffered most is my shopping, because all my shopping was at the airports. Because that is when you have the time, you don't care, the prices are higher, it doesn't matter. So you don't buy everything. And now, things are all getting old in the last 6 months. So I'm really looking forward to going to another airport. Go to Changi, for example, that would be my dream. Or to Dubai. It's amazing. But at the same time, we get used to a lot of these things. You realize that you can do without it. So it's all very amazing, the lifestyle and the capability of mankind to adjust ourselves to different circumstances.
Sure.
Well, thank you very much. Sorry?
I consider myself fortunate because at least we are able to move around and we are still healthy, but there are many people who are having deep financial problems. They're stuck in hospitals and have the question of life and death. So in that sense, I do consider myself quite fortunate despite not being able to follow one of my big passions.
There is a saying, imprisonment even in a golden cage is imprisonment.
Yeah.
Therefore, it is better to be in a golden cage than elsewhere.
Yes.
And Singapore may be the right place too, because you're not short of anything. But do you move around with masks and things? Do you?
Yes, it is compulsory to wear a mask here, and there's a fine if you don't wear that.
The situation in Singapore is not uncontrollable, the corona situation there.
It has become much better, I must say. We do have, especially in the dormitories for migrant workers, there is still prevalence, but it has become much better than what it was 2 months back. And even though life is not fully back to normal, people are going to offices, going to shops with certain restrictions.
I know you are interested in the life of migrants, etc. The biggest problem is in Dubai and India. Singapore may not be so big, isn't it? The bigger case is about migrants.
Yeah, the biggest percentage of cases have been in the dormitories, and the migrant workers, they are pretty much confined to their rooms, and they are not allowed yet to.
But where are they from? Where are they from, the migrant workers mainly?
We have different types. There are ones who are domestic helpers, who mainly are women who come from Indonesia, Philippines, to some extent India. But the construction and the marine workers, they come mainly from Bangladesh. Some come from India, China as well.
Philippines also?
Not the men. The women are the domestic helpers are the ones who come from the Philippines. Among the men, the migrant workers are mostly in the shipping sector and some in architecture.
So what do you do for them in your organization?
So we have been running poetry competitions, cultural events for lower wage migrant workers to give them a cultural platform and also give them a direct voice through culture to talk about their situation. And we have been doing this for the last 7 years in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Kenya. And every 2 years, we organize a big global migrant festival under which we invite refugee artists, low-wage migrant artists from around the world to once again use culture, whether it be plays, photographs, poetry, short stories, to talk about their situation directly instead of through NGOs or other people's voices.
So it's not financial, it's more like cultural and...
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you very much for spending some time with me. It has been a great pleasure seeing you, talking to you. And I look forward to your next travelogue and your poetry anthology. All right? So I hope things will get better and we'll be able to visit each other. Today, I was having this illusion or hallucination of two of you walking in from the gate. It looks so real. It looks so
Yes,
real. And then you realize, my God, I've not even seen it.
your teapot looks very inviting, I must say. And yeah, we
All right.
look to having some tea from that same pot sometimes.
Right.
Likewise, the invitation extends to you.
I normally pretend to drink tea from there, but today I didn't do that.
And
Okay.
likewise,
Thank
the
you very
invitation
much.
extends
My
to you.
pleasure.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.